Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our Money Matters session, part of the Friar Ties series. I'm thrilled to have you, and tonight we are recording this session so that if you have anything you want to revisit, or you know someone who might have missed the event and they might want to see it, they can watch the recording on the Friar Ties website. Tonight, just a couple of housekeeping things. There's a question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. That's where we're going to be checking to see, what questions you might have throughout the evening. Please, as you hear something and you want to ask a question, please go ahead and type it in there. We'll be taking questions at the end, so we'll address it after we've given the presentation. But please, as it comes up, type it in that question section down at the bottom. If for some reason we don't get to your question tonight, we will send you an email with a response in the next day or two. And then at the end of this session, afterward, you will see in your email, there will be a survey. If you would please only put nice things in, that would be appreciated. No, but we do use the surveys for feedback. This is the second of a 4-part series. So it's important for us to know what went well, what we should have shortened up. And we'd be very grateful if you would take the time to fill out that survey. So without any further ado, let's get started. My name is Andrea Krupp, and I am the Director of Planned and Estate Giving at Providence College. I'm 1 year into this position, and I am a friar at heart now, even though I did not actually graduate from PC. But the 2 women that are with me tonight did graduate from PC, and they are both very accomplished professionals. Their full bios are on the Friar Tie website, so I encourage you to go read that. I'll give you a brief introduction to them. Deb Dinardo is class of 78. She's an attorney at the law firm of Orson and Brusini in Providence, Rhode Island. She received her bachelor's degree from Providence and her law degree from Syracuse University College of Law. Deb has extensive experience in trust and estate administration and planning. She advises both individuals and businesses on their wealth transfer, whether it's a sale of a business or a communication of wealth to the next generation. She preserves assets and prepares for the transfer of those assets to other generations. Deb has received the Harold Solovitzik Leadership Award from the Rhode Island Foundation, and she co-authored a practical guide to estate planning in 2019. Thanks for being with us, Deb. I appreciate it. Kathleen Entwistle comes from a long history of PC graduates and family members. She is an 87 grad and the mother of a year 15 grad and a year 17 grad, and her spouse was also a PC grad. Kathy is a private wealth manager, wealth advisor, a managing director, sports and entertainment director at Entwistle Partners with Morgan Stanley Private Wealth Management in New Jersey. That's a mouthful. Kathy received her bachelor's degree from Providence College and her MBA from Fordham University. She's also gone on to earn many other designations. She's a certified financial planner, a certified divorce financial analyst, and holds Series 7 and Series 66 licenses. Kathy was named to the Forbes list of the top 200 women advisors from 2017 to 2020. Like I said, that's just the tip of the iceberg. So these women are certainly qualified to talk with us tonight about philanthropy, about asset protection, and wealth transfer. So those are the 3 areas we're going to cover. And Kathy, I'm going to start with you and just ask you to give a little bit of background about components of a financial plan, insurance, things that might be top of mind for the group that we have in front of us, and just generally, what are some important considerations for folks who are now ending or slowing down maybe their accumulation of assets and looking forward to the future?
Sure, thanks. Thank you. Happy to be here. And yes, I would say the first thing that I think everybody has to get comfortable with is just the topic of money and the conversation around it. and to realize that money is nothing more than a tool to help you reach your goals. So the more you understand about your money and what it can do for you, it's less about the money and it's more about the purpose of it. And understanding your priorities when it comes to your goals and values and laying out a financial plan that matches along those lines makes sense. Financial plan is really a roadmap. It's a place to get from point A to point B and how you're going to do that. I always say to clients, now most of us aren't traveling too much right now, but typically we'll be traveling and going on vacations. And I'll say to them, you don't show up at the airport and say, I wonder where we want to go today. Or I wonder if we land in Paris, if there'll be a hotel that's available to us, or what we'll do when we get there. So you put a plan together and you think about it and you decide where you want to go and how you want to do it and when you're leaving and how much it's going to cost. And you have to do the same with your own personal financial plan. And it's like a breathing, living document. It's just a reflection of your life and where you're at and where you want to be. So the components of a financial plan are cash management, which is understanding money in and money out. So we use like income statements and balance sheets and so forth to understand that. And again, your resources are your salaries, your dividends and interest, all sorts of ways to earn income, and then what your expenses are. And you always want to have more money left over and not spend it all. So people that do that are the ones who make out the best in life. And hopefully at this point in our lives, we're all at that point. As you said, we've spent our whole life accumulating. At some point, we're going to get to that distribution phase. So we want to make sure we have enough in retirement and to enjoy the things we want to do. So cash management is the first piece. Investments is the second. We want to grow our assets so they keep up with inflation and create a nest egg for us when we get older. We also have insurance and wealth protection, we'll call it. And wealth protection is so important, especially at this point in our lives when we're sort of at that empty nesting stage, maybe getting ready to retire. I always say, at this point, you've won the game, you have the assets, protect them and grow them thoughtfully. So we use insurance as protection. There's the estate planning area that Deb, has so much background and knowledge in, and I love meeting a great estate planning attorney. It is so worth the time and effort to spend with somebody who knows what they're doing. They can save you so much in the long run. So to put that out there properly is critical. So that's like wealth transfer, wealth protection. There's all sorts of things that estate planning aspect will help you with. Retirement planning, making sure that you have all your retirement assets in place. And then there's education planning, of course. Anyone that has children at college or thinking about it, or grandchildren, 529 plans and so forth are things we talk about. And then the last, but not the least, is charitable giving, planned giving, because we all want to make an impact, and there's many different ways we can make that impact. And by giving to others, I think Providence College is a community of giving, of givers, and this is an area to address as well. So those would be the components.
Thanks. Just, can you talk a little bit about, so you mentioned insurance and being part of your wealth protection, and we had talked a little bit about long-term care insurance. How does that play in at this stage of somebody's life? Is it too late to buy long-term care insurance? Are they all the same?
No, I would say most people will look at long-term care insurance in their 50s or in their 60s. The key is to apply for it while you're still healthy. You don't want to wait until something happens where you might not get long-term care insurance. There's many different types of long-term care insurance. And the reason why you want long-term care insurance, I would say, particularly women, because we outlive our spouses, and a lot of us at this point, I've got 3 adult children aging in the range of 25 to 30. I do not want any of the 3 of them to take care of me when I'm older, and I'm sure they don't want to be doing it either. So it's a great way to, put money aside to not only for your care, but also to protect the money that you've earned and worked hard for your whole life. So it's a way to, hedge a medical situation where you need support. And long-term care comes in many different forms. And it's good to explore those different options. There's traditional long-term care where you pay for it for your whole life. Every year you have a premium. Whether you use it or not, you pay the premium. And if you don't use long-term care insurance, the premium like goes away. It's not something you can recover unless you buy like a hybrid type, which has become much more popular in the last decade, which there's usually like a death benefit associated, or you can take some of your premium back, usually 80% or so, if you decide that you're not going to use it for long-term care, but you want to travel the world or something along those lines. So that's another option. And there's also annuities, investment vehicles that are tied to insurance, but are also available for long-term care. So there's many different ways to look at it. And I would encourage you, the first step is exploring the option, or really the first step is recognizing that it's a good thing to have to protect your investment of time and assets that you've built up over so many years.
And you had mentioned that you don't want to live with any of your 3 children, and they don't want to live with you in the long term. But so how do you have that conversation? You know, when we're talking about financial stability and transfer of wealth, eventually, who do you bring into the conversation? What do you tell your adult children at this time? And how do you include, or do you include other professionals in the conversation?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I think, a lot of us growing up, we have lots of different like messages about money, how we grew up, what we talked about. So like in my family, talking about money was like, we were quiet about money. Talking about it might seem like disrespectful or showy or whatever it may be. So you have to understand where you came from in terms of that conversation and that comfort level. And then you have to think about what you're trying to achieve. So we say as financial advisors all the time, you need to have that conversation with your children. And what's very funny is, some of you may know, my son, who is now 28, went to Providence College. He works with me on my team. He's also a financial advisor. And about a year ago, he said to me, so we should really sit down and have that conversation with Dad about your money. And I was like, wait a minute, that wasn't for me. That was this, I'm talking about our clients. And it made me realize, it's really not too late. It's never too soon. It's so important. And it's such a gift to be able to have that conversation with your family, to let them know that they do or they don't necessarily have to worry about you from a financial standpoint. There's so much to worry about. To be able to take that burden away from your family, it's important, or at least have the conversation and get it out on the table. So I think it's never too late to start, and it's never too early to start either. It's like, have the conversation. And you would want to bring in, especially if you have significant assets, you would absolutely want to bring in, an estate planning attorney. You would want to bring Deb into the conversation. There's tools and resources she's going to talk about in a minute that she can support you with. You want to bring in potentially the CPA as well. But mostly I think having family conversations around the table and starting, you don't have to like put it all out on day one, but starting to have those conversations is so important. And it actually takes a lot of stress away once you start to have the conversations, because it's just getting everybody more comfortable with different concepts around what you need, what they need, and how you're going to support each other.
I love the description of this being not only your financial plan being a living, breathing document, but, Deb, you and I have talked about that being true for estate planning as well. And this conversation is really over time. It starts with something small. It can start with, hey, maybe we should have a conversation about long-term care or something else. And then it evolves and becomes much more comfortable after you're already in it. So Deb,
sorry. Apologize.
Go ahead, Kath.
No, the last thing I was going to say is with the long-term care piece, there's so many different components to it. It's not the traditional, you have to go to a nursing home. A lot of these long-term care policies allow for you to be taken care of at home. And if you do have, family members, there's ways to make it work for you. So that was just a little joke from my side with the kids.
So Deb, let's move over to your side. Are you in agreement with Kathy? Do you take the same approach as far as communication with other professionals of your, that your clients have engaged? And do you encourage your clients to talk to their families about estate planning?
Yeah, so I do agree with Kathy, and I have a variety of responses that I get, right? So some families happy to talk about it. They do a family meeting. I have one particular family that every Thanksgiving, so you decide if you think that's a good idea or not, but every Thanksgiving dinner together, the parents who are around 90 now, but they're both still quite able, and 5 adult kids and a whole bunch of grandkids, but the mom and dad who are in their 90s and the children, that the child generation, every Thanksgiving they do like the full family update. Here's where we are, here's who's on the team. To Kathy's point, the children know something happens to mom or dad, they know who the accountant is and how to reach him or her. They know who the attorney is. They know, in other words, how to reach me, who I am. Actually, I've met all of them anyway, because frequently we participate in those family meetings with the family members at the parents' request. They would need to know who Kathy is, the investment side, anybody else involved. And it does make, I think, it makes the transition, because it's a grieving emotional transition when, right, the trigger is either a serious health event that the parent doesn't die, or there is a death. And so at that time, do you want your children to be struggling to figure out who the accountant is if it's April the 10th and they don't know if the tax return got filed yet or not? What do you want your kids to be dealing with, which is Kathy's point, which I agree with. But, the opposite end of that spectrum, I have clients, and the worst case scenario I ever saw was extremely wealthy family, sold a business and did a very good job of protecting and preserving the net sale proceeds, invested, grew it, lots of money. And the mother, who would have been at the time in her 80s, had 2 children in their 50s or so, and one was disabled and one was not. And she fully expected the not disabled child to look out after her brother, which everybody, again, the team, the accountant, the financial team, the attorneys, myself included, everybody figured for sure that this would occur. And the daughter, fully informed, she knows how to take, it's her responsibility to look out for her brother, etc. But the mom would never share the financial information. There's a trust for you, there's a trust for your brother, that was it, no information. And every year we would try, again, these family meetings were semi-annual. Every year we would try to suggest to mom a little bit of information maybe she could start to spill out. Because to Kathy's point, this was big money. Okay. And eventually, after several years, mom finally agreed to show the daughter one investment account statement for her brother's trust. And it was actually rather modest, but at least it was something. And the daughter's like, oh, good, thank God, I have this much money to take care of my brother, etc. Anyway, so gradually we worked. And so gradually we got to the point where the daughter saw all those zeros, right? In the big picture, she saw the big number. She was learning this well into her 50s, if not 60s at the time. Mom still in very good health at the time. But it was never the same again. Once she saw those numbers and the mother began to decline, she was not at all generous with her brother. It was very sad to see. Her reaction was, oh, because he had not been married and he did not have children. It was just him, nice disabled gentleman. He had some abilities, but definitely some limitations. And she knew her children would inherit everything wasn't spent on him, because she was the kid with the grandkids, right? So it just was such a sad dynamic. And so to me, I don't know, right? Every family's different, but I think there's a point where it's too late. I don't know how to gauge what's too early. Every family's different, but I think there's a point where it's too late. But do encourage the families to communicate. And sometimes the children will reach out and say, you know, can you ask mom and dad? I'm not greedy. I'm not nosy. It's just, in fact, the one young man, I'll never forget, he called me and he said, I hope to heck I'm not the healthcare agent, because I don't want to be the healthcare agent. So, you know, they knew, these poor kids, they knew nothing. And in some families, that's what happens. But it's important because so Kathy spoke about the comprehensive financial plan, right? So the comprehensive estate plan, the components really would include, you know, the healthcare power of attorney. You're alive but incapacitated. Somebody needs to make a medical decision for you. Who do you choose, right? Another hugely important decision. Who do we choose, right?
You mean it doesn't have to be the oldest child, Deb?
I was just going to say the oldest kid, because it's the oldest kid, and that kid's least appropriate to have the job. Or if you do not have children, do you have dear friends? Do you have perhaps nieces and nephews? I have 4 ladies, all clients of mine. They were unrelated, and they actually cross-named each other. So it would be like me naming Andrea. Andrea names Kathy. Kathy names me. So they did that for each other because they didn't have family, you know, and that works out. But the healthcare power of attorney and who's in charge is important. The financial power of attorney, same thing. You're alive but incapacitated. Who's going to sign your income tax return for you? Who's going to have authority to deal with Kathy, your investment advisor, your accountant? Who's going to have the authority to pay just the regular bills, you know, to use your checkbook? So again, choosing the right person or people for that role as well.
Deb, just
Yes,
let me
Andrea.
ask a quick question about that.
Yes.
Can you tell the difference between, so why your consideration of who you pick for a healthcare power of attorney maybe a little different for the financial power of attorney as far as when that is a viable document? So if I sign a healthcare power of attorney, can somebody come in and, you know, and tomorrow tell me I need to go to the hospital? Versus signing that when is that financial power of attorney actually active? What's the difference?
So the healthcare power of attorney is effective immediately. However, the doctor or hospital or whoever the healthcare provider is, they are going to follow you and your directions and your instructions so long as they feel you're able to reply, right? So you could be in the emergency room at Rhode Island Hospital, otherwise nothing else was wrong with you. Some emergency, God forbid, some car accident, something happened, right? So there you are in the emergency room, you need to have surgery authorized, right? So the doctors and the nurses and the staff, if they trust that you're able, right, to make that decision, and they're just taking the decision straight from you. You could be, you know, 29 or 99, that's totally irrelevant. But the document is valid immediately. So if you're in the emergency room and you can't provide an instruction, or they're really not comfortable with your instruction, then they're going to go to your agent in the healthcare power. The financial power of attorney is similar, except there is an alternative. So most people sign a financial power of attorney that's effective immediately. Again, you know, whether your agent runs off to the bank and, you know, swoops out a whole bunch of money from your checking account is really an issue, in my humble opinion, relates to who you chose, right? And then who did you choose for this job? You can have co-agents, checks and balances, very popular. But the alternative to an immediate effective financial power of attorney is what's known in the business as a springing power. So you sign it, it's all legal, but it doesn't trigger. Your agent has no authority on the finance side unless something occurs. And the document will say what that something is. And usually that something is when your primary care physician writes a letter and says so, right? Andrea is no longer competent, temporarily or permanently, and the agent should step in. Sometimes it's one doctor, sometimes it's 2. You can practically say anything you like. So the downside to springing documents, in my opinion, I'd be interested, Kathy, if you've had an opinion on this, that every time I've had a client use a springing power, when the son or daughter or niece or nephew or best friend, whoever it is, when the agent goes to the bank or whatever the financial institution is with the springing power, with or without 1 or 2 letters from the doctors, it's always like, ooh, is this ethical? Is this legitimate? Now I have to research the doctor. How do I know it's not a made up doctor, right? So we've always found statistically more issues with the springing power than with the non-springing power. So Kathy, I don't know if you've had that experience or your opinion on that.
Yeah, I would say that it's better to be as clear and upfront as possible. And with the springing power does leave some gray area, because financial firms, particularly with elderly or sick individuals, are very careful about making sure that they're protected. There's a lot of compliance and risk around this area. So they are going to be absolutely 100% sure before they accept the document. And that might require a lot more work on your part in order to have that accepted, meaning, the family's part, to try to cross the T's and dot the I's. So sometimes it's better to actually have the traditional documents in place, if that makes sense.
In addition to the powers of attorney, obviously, again, still part of the comprehensive or complete estate plan, because those 2 documents are operating when you're alive. And really, it's somebody taking care of you, looking out for you, health-wise or financial-wise. So you're still the primary client, if you will, to the agents, right? But the estate planning business always includes a will. And the will, obviously effective, again, it's legal the minute you sign it, but it's, amendable, revocable. You can throw it in the trash, start from scratch, or modify it and amend it a bunch of times over the years as you would see fit. And it basically disposes of your property when you are deceased. The alternative to a will, and very popular indeed, is a trust, a revocable trust. So commonly called the revocable living trust. It's a living trust. It's, to Kathy's earlier point, it's a living, breathing document with you. You also can amend it, terminate it, throw it away, start from scratch over the years, just like a will. And it also will dispose of your property, just like a will, when you are deceased. But the popularity, I think, of the trusts comes from the goal that most people have to avoid the probate system. So if you die and you're using a will to dispose of your property, your will goes to the local probate court. Depends which state you live in. Some states have a county-wide probate system. Some states have a city and town system, just depends. But it goes to itself, the document goes to the court, basically with a list of all your assets and all of your heirs. And that's a public process. That's a public proceeding. So if your neighbor lady next door is nosy, she can go look. If you were, a brain surgeon, for sake of example, all your patients or their families, can go and look. If you're a teacher, all your students, current and former, can go and look. So the privacy component that a trust gives, that a will doesn't, seems to be a key for many people, because if you die and you're using a trust instead, it doesn't go into the probate system. Trusts are private except as to the people named in them. So you have to show the beneficiaries, what's what inside the trust itself, including all the asset information, but not to third parties, not to strangers. So, yep.
I think there's an idea that you have to be wealthy to have a trust, right? You trusts are for people with millions of dollars. Is that accurate?
No, so that's not true at all. The trust, the small, I call it the smallest trust, I guess, the trust I prepared for a little elderly lady with the smallest amount of money ever used in a trust in my career. She was an elderly lady. She was widowed. She had modest assets. She rented. She did not own any real estate. Her life savings was $85,000. She was greatly estranged from her daughter. She had just the one child, but she was very close to her 2 grandchildren. And she wanted nothing to do with the daughter. She did not want the daughter to see anything. She had done all her research herself. And actually, Kathy, it was the investment advisor. She had called and said, I read up on trust, and then he introduced her to me. And we went out to her little apartment to see her, and she said, I know all about it, and she did. She recited to me exactly everything a trust could do. She said, I know I don't have very much money, so she's actually sort of following Andrea's theme. This is a true story. And is it like too small, right? My 85 grand. But she knew if she used the trust, she had her cousin all lined up as the trustee. Cousin was quite a bit younger than she. Cousin was the trustee. Her grandson and granddaughter, 50-50, they were going to split everything. And she knew if it was in the trust, her daughter wouldn't be able to see. And in order for her daughter to get any access at all, she had to go, again, this is Rhode Island, she would have to go to the Superior Court, which is, you know, not just like walking into the local probate court. So she knew exactly what she wanted. We did the little trust. It funded. A couple of years later, she passed away. The cousin called me and she said, I know exactly what to do. I already told the daughter to go pound salt. And, you know, it worked out exactly the way she wants. So it makes you feel so good when you do that, right?
And I would say too, Deb, the other part that's like super important is when you go and do any work, legal work you do, any estate planning you do, one thing that we find is we want to make sure, and why you want to coordinate with your financial advisor and your CPA and your estate planning attorney is because you actually want to make sure that it's implemented properly.
Correct.
Right?
So I'm going to ask you both a question. Deb, there might be something else you want to talk about, but let me just step in here because I saw a question about in the question and answers, even though this is breaking my own rule about doing questions while we're going through. But the question is, who do you really need as part of a team, right? Do you need everybody, an estate planning attorney, a CPA, a financial planner? So what would be the ideal picture? Like if you both are working as part of a team, who do you like to have as components? And how does somebody decide really who they need as part of their team and who, you know, what pieces they might be able to do on their own, or how do you handle that?
Yeah, I can start with a quick answer. One thing is you want to make sure you do everything right, whether, as Deb said, you have $85,000 saved up or you have 85 million, right? You want to make sure that you do it correctly. And just like if you had, you know, something wrong, you know, physically, you broke your leg, you're not going to splint it yourself, right? You're going to go to the doctor and get the medical advice and make decisions based on what you're hearing. You need to do the same with your financial picture. So I would say, whether you have a trusted CPA that you work with or a trusted estate planning attorney or a trusted investment advisor, go to the person that you are close with and let them know that you're ready to take, you know, another look and think about the different components. And we're constantly working with, you know, the estate planning attorney. Typically, I refer more, I would say, to the estate planning attorney than maybe you know, usually when clients are at the estate planning attorney, they usually already have an advisor in place. But a lot of clients will come to me and they don't have an estate planning attorney in place. So I will refer them to Deb and high quality, you know, estate planning attorneys like Deb to create that plan for them. And we work very closely together, you know, whether it's by email right now or Zoom, and have conference calls. And then once the legal documents are drawn up, we take them and make sure that we're titling everything properly on our end. We just want to make sure it's all done well for the client. And to get the advice, you can either decide to take advice or not, but I think you need to know what the advice is before you can make a decision.
I would only just add there, Andrea, it depends on, and I'm assuming the thought behind the question that was relayed to you there from one of the viewers, right? Not everybody has everybody, right? So you don't need, you know, the lady with the $85,000, she had her investment guy, and she ended up also, you know, having me. That's all she needed. You know, I think H&R Block did her income taxes. I mean, it was a very simple situation. She didn't have an insurance advisor. She didn't have 4 Kathleens, you know, she only had one. And so sometimes it's even just like one person, you know, to Kathy's point, it's like what we would call your most trusted advisor, right? Who's your most trusted advisor? Everybody else is ancillary. But for most people, so not the super wealthy and not my little lady with the 85 grand, but for most people, it's at least two. It's at least the financial advisor and the attorney. Sometimes the accountant's in the loop, sometimes not. Sometimes the CPA is, just transactional, just preparing and filing returns and not part of a relationship. If there's a business, if one or more members of this family owns a business, whether it's a single person or a married couple, but if there's a business involved, usually the accountant is the most trusted advisor because he or she's been in the soup with them, with building this business or these businesses over the years. So oftentimes the CPA is primary and the rest of us are ancillary. So it just depends, but not everybody needs everybody, but at least to consider introducing us to each other is also helpful. If you're a client of mine, and maybe you and the CPA and I work together, and I never heard of Kathy, I've got her name written on some little piece of paper or, scanned into my electronic folder or something for you. But we've never connected. That can, oftentimes not work to your best interests to not introduce us, at least introduce us. We don't have to have like a huge meeting together.
And I think I really like, Kathy, what you said. The goal is to do this correctly. And there are two ways to look at that, right? There's doing it correctly under the legal and financial regulations and laws and making sure documents are clean and executed appropriately, and valid, but there's also doing it correctly for the donor, right? Or for the person who's actually executing their financial plan and their estate plan, because when you create these documents, there are goals, right? Whether it's to get yourself through retirement and travel the world, or to transfer wealth to your children, and to make sure that the money gets to the place where it's supposed to get. And so if you have a financial plan with Kathy and an estate plan with Deb, but the assets aren't communicating, right? They're at cross purposes. You won't know that until it's too late, right? So having that communication, I think, really helps in all situations. Deb, so as you're going through this, somebody comes to you with an estate plan, and we are talking about this later part of your life. What if they have an estate plan already that they've had for a number of years? Why do they need to come and see you? And then Kathy, why do they need to come and see you now? We've got documents in place. What could possibly need to be done now?
Right. So they might have documents in place that they created, 20, 25, 30 years ago when the children were little. Again, if it's a married couple here, we're talking about, oh gosh, we need a will. Our first child was just born, right? So all of a sudden everybody runs out and gets a will because their first child was just born. And sometimes they might update it a little bit depending on how many kids they have, but it could be in the drawer for 30 years easily, right? And then they never bring it out. So, reasons to review the estate plan cover everything from change in family circumstances. There could be a health situation with one or more of your beneficiaries. Again, whether it's a child or a grandchild or a friend, a cousin, whoever your chosen beneficiaries are, there could be a change there that needs to be revisited. The people you chose as your fiduciaries, right? The person you named in that financial power of attorney, the person you named in that trust, maybe they have died. Maybe they have personal issues now. They couldn't or wouldn't want the job if they needed to step up and help you, or you've just simply changed your mind. Maybe you named your sibling right at the time because the children were 2, 3, and 5 years old, right? Now your children are like Kathy, right? She's got a couple of kids between 25 and 30. She might be removing her siblings now as her fiduciaries and putting the kids in. Right. So just sort of family reasons for doing it. Another big reason is obviously the tax laws have absolutely changed over the past, 20, 25, 30 years. They're really going to change yet again. We're just not quite sure when, but sooner rather than later, they're going to change again. So tax law changes are huge. again, if you'd like to protect your assets and preserve them from the government, who already got paid multiple times as you earned and grew them along the road. So if you don't want to pay again when you die, there are tax reasons for reviewing. And I guess my third biggest reason for reviewing is right up Kathy's alley. You know, you've been growing and investing, right? So maybe it's a big retirement account that you just rolled over into you rolled over your 403B or your 401k or whatever into an IRA rollover. You know, your assets have been growing. And when you first created the will and the estate plan, 20, however many years ago, you had nowhere near those assets. Maybe you, let alone growing them themselves, maybe in the interim, you've inherited from another relative or a friend. And so now you have that much more that hasn't been addressed really properly in the old plan.
Yeah. And I would add to that too. I think that's great, Deb. That's part of why we do financial plans with our clients every year, because there's always things that are changing and things that need to be addressed. And some things that you also want to think about there are things that settle outside of a will, right? Retirement accounts.
Right.
You have to look at your beneficiaries and make sure that the people who are listed on your IRA accounts, your 401k accounts, things like that are still the same people that you want to get that money if something were to happen to you. And also with insurance policies, unless you have your insurance in an ILIT trust, a life insurance trust, insurance policies settle outside of the will as well. And so you want to make sure that you do a beneficiary check on all of your retirement accounts and all of your insurance accounts as well. We always say there's only 3 places you can leave your money. It's either to your loved ones, to the United States government, or to charity. So you want to think about that as well as where do you want your money to go? And do you want to do it while you're living or after you're deceased? I mean, those are questions to think about as well. Some people really enjoy giving their money to family members or to charities while they're alive so they can enjoy it. So those are some things to think about.
I don't think I've met a single person who enjoys giving their money to the federal government. Not a one, right? That's not their first choice.
Or the state.
Or the
Sometimes
state.
it's
That's
the
right.
state.
There's not a one. They'd rather give it a whole lot of other places, which actually rolls right into my favorite topic, philanthropy. But so there are assets that are better used for philanthropic gifts maybe than giving to a child, right? Is that right, Kathy? There might be something where tax consequences are different, or how do you decide?
In terms of what type of asset to give? In terms of,
yeah.
Okay. I would say from a charity standpoint, so let's just talk about charity standpoint right now. There's many different ways to give a charity that can also benefit you. So writing a check is great. I'm not saying don't write a check. There's a tax benefit there for sure. But a lot of times we'll have our clients, if they have appreciated stock, say you were fortunate enough to buy Apple or Google or, Amazon or Netflix over the last 10 or plus years, you might have appreciated stock. And, instead of selling the stock, paying the taxes, the capital gains on the stock, and then giving it to the charity of your choice, you can gift the actual shares of stock straight out and save from any taxes, which I think is a huge home run, from that standpoint. You can also gift to a giving vehicle like a donor advised fund, and you get the write-off right away, but you might not want to give all that money away right at that moment. So you have time to think about where to give it. The last thing I'll say with your family, one of the best things I would recommend to anybody who's listening tonight, you can have almost like a meeting with your family and talk about, we tell our clients to do this, and I also do this with my family around Thanksgiving. Come to the Thanksgiving table with almost like a minute presentation of who or what your favorite charity is and why. And as the matriarch or the patriarch, you can give each family member, look, we're going to give away X dollars, and you're each going to have the opportunity to choose a charity of your choice, but you have to come to the table and tell us why and present. And as long as the presentation makes sense, we're going to agree to give to your charity along with everybody else's at tonight's dinner table. What is amazing is it's a great way for you to start having conversations with your family about money. It's also, it opens family members up to understand what each one is most interested in, and you'll be surprised at that. And it just brings you closer because you're coming together on a item that is like passionate to you and to each member of your family. So that's my
great
recommendation.
idea.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
happy
awesome.
to come to your
That's
table,
awesome.
and I'm happy to come to your table next Thanksgiving and talk about Providence College.
Absolutely,
I'll
we're big
start preparing
fans.
now. That's right.
And Kathy, that's awesome. And to follow up on your theme, some families also do it generationally, right? I have clients who do it like multi-generationally, right? So depending on obviously how old everybody is, but sometimes it's the grandchildren too here, right? You're going to allocate to each grandchild X amount of dollars. Doesn't have to be a lot, right? Could be $100 per grandchild, depends how many grandkids you have, right? So it's the younger generation learning from those next one or two older generations, and so they pass down this tradition through the generations, which is very nice as well.
I love that idea. Now I'm looking at the time, and you and I, all of us could talk about this for hours more, but we have some great questions. So let's get to those and then see where we are at the end. Okay, first one, assuming your children in their 20s are grounded and in a good place, when do you tell them how much you really have in money? So to give them down the road. And we're talking 10 plus million, this person says. So when do you start having that conversation in real numbers?
So I would just say, I don't know, Kathy, your approach, but when you say 10 plus million to me and you've got kids who are grounded in their 20s, you really need to talk about wealth transfer strategies, tax planning, right? You don't want to die with $10 million and your wonderful children who are grounded and awesome don't get to inherit much or all of it because state or federal tax authorities got a big chunk too. So the communication, I think, with the children can begin to evolve around the fact that, you know, we as a family are blessed, but we got tax problems. So let's talk about how to do this. And there are different kinds of trusts. Again, even if your child is 20 whatever and grounded, you can make direct gifts, or you could use different kinds of trusts that the children participate. I have clients who have done this where they include the child in the discussion about the terms of their trust, right? So if Andrea is my daughter and I'm going to create a trust for Andrea's benefit, not because I don't trust Andrea, right? And she's very grounded. I would give her the, $3 million or whatever it is directly, right? But I want to protect that money for Andrea's two little boys too, right? And so, and protect it in part from taxes, right? Because you can save taxes multi-generationally. So if I give Andrea $5 million and Andrea dies, Andrea now has a $5 million problem and a potential estate tax problem. But if I put $5 million in a trust for Andrea and her kids, then there's no problem when Andrea dies and there's no problem with the kids die. So you can do generational stuff if you want to. You certainly don't have to. But at that level, you really need to talk about some tax savings techniques, even if you're making an outright gift.
And what's interesting now, too, if you think about it, is if you have significant wealth and you end up putting it into a trust today, gifting it into a trust today, there's maximums that you can gift in your lifetime. But what happens once it's in that trust, it can grow. And the growth is available it can grow as large as it goes, and it's no longer going to have the estate tax attached to it. So you're avoiding this huge tax later on by putting money away in a trust today. So that's one thing to think about. The other thing that I would say is for us, and I work at a big wealth management firm. Most wealth management firms for our, ultra high net worth clients, we have a whole family office resources where we will bring the families in and have a family meeting and bring in wealth education and different topics that would be interesting for your family and to help you start that conversation. questions like, what's important to you about money? Not how much money do we have? Sometimes starting there and getting more into the, sort of priorities of what money does for you and your family, as opposed to the actual dollars and cents to start, is a good way to do it. And the last thing that I'll say, just off the cuff, off of what Deb said, is if you do bring your adult children in for conversations about how to set up the trusts, typically those trusts, the funds in the trust usually are invested, and it would probably be great to have them be part of the investment conversation so they get to understand what the funds are invested in. And a lot of times they'll take interest and start being part of the conversation and contributing areas that they might be interested in. For example, a lot of young people in their 20s are very interested in impact investing and sustainable investing, and bringing that to the table would really be very interesting to them as well, I believe. So,
and it also fosters.
Oh, pardon me, Andrea, go ahead.
Go ahead, Deb.
Just was going to say, to Kathy's earlier example about Thanksgiving dinner, and everybody brings their 1-minute pitch for the, which charity should be chosen or which charities should be chosen that year. If you're talking at numbers at 10 million and above, part of your planning could also include a private foundation in some fashion, a way to permanently arrange for this perpetual kind of family philanthropy to occur, so that you get the multi-generational, you get different branches of the family, everybody's participating. Trusts are used for that. Corporations are used for that. There's a lot of different ways to do it. But, as Kathleen said, maybe as part of this family office advisory unit, right? That would be part of their conversation. Or even if you don't participate in that, be just with you and your team of advisors who we've talked about. It might be the accountant, it might be the attorney, it might be Kathy, the investment advisor, to focus on the philanthropy angle also from the heart, right? How to perpetuate, but that's also tax savings and gives the family something to always know they'll be together, working together toward, even if, as the years pass, they might otherwise go their separate ways, but you can help sort of bind them with the charity angle if you want to, and obviously helps everybody to help somebody else, right? It helps the nonprofits in the world get what they need as well.
That's a great example. I have clients that the parents set up a family trust or family foundation, I should say, years ago, and they've both passed away in the last 10 years or so. And 10 years later, the 5 adult children with their children get together, and they have once a year, they do a family reunion, and they all get together and also have a family meeting about the foundation and where they're going to give that money and all, and it keeps them together. It's glue.
That's excellent. We have 3 more questions here, so let's see if we can get to those. Thank you for this program. Is it recommended that your spouse not be your trustee financially if you have a revocable trust, but they can be your healthcare proxy more practically?
So there's no prohibition as to who is or isn't serving as the trustee. So I'm not sure exactly the purpose for the question. What I think of, and I could be wrong here, but I'm thinking of the situation where this is the 2nd or 3rd marriage, and we haven't discussed that at all this evening so far. That's sort of a whole other topic itself. But if you are a blended family, or this is a 2nd or a 3rd marriage, selection of who's the fiduciary can be ever so much more important. The healthcare, it's usually the spouse, not always, that's not required either, but it's usually the spouse and then 1 or 2 alternate agents. And trustee is oftentimes the spouse and a co-trustee. That's common for several reasons. Tax reason is one, and asset protection reason is another. If you're deceased first and there's a trust, if this woman, presumably this is a woman, she's deceased, and her husband is the sole trustee, then from the asset protection component, he gets taken advantage of. Some wily woman works her way into his world, and the next thing you know, she swooped out all the money out of the trust. She doesn't even wait for him to die. I can't tell you how many times I've had that happen, especially happens in Florida. No disrespect intended to Florida, but happens in Florida all the time. That your husband in this example, if he was the sole trustee, he could be at risk, right? And the money would certainly be at risk, but he as well, he could end up impoverished and the girlfriend walks away with the dough. So having a co-trustee there, again, depending on your age and circumstances, could be very helpful in the long run also, if that's what the questioner was asking.
Okay. Kathy, can you steer your 401k to your desired beneficiaries through your trust?
Oh, well, this might even be a better question for Deb. For the 401k, that's a corporate, so you might be able to. I don't know, Deb. I haven't come across that one.
Yeah, so I think the question is, again, I'm interpreting here, but it's really, and this was Kathy's point earlier on, beneficiary designations, right, are crucial as well. So I have a trust and I have an investment account, non-retirement with Kathy. So we want to make sure that my trust is, that the investment account is titled in the name of my trust to avoid the probate system. That's going to make everything work properly. But my life insurance, my annuities, my retirement accounts, including my 401k, they are going to operate by the beneficiary designation form. So if your 401k names your trust as the designated beneficiary, which you're legally allowed to do, you could do that if that made the most sense. You certainly can do that, but most of the time it's the beneficiary designation attached right to that 401k plan, which is going to direct where everything
Thank you,
goes.
Deb. That did answer the question, I think, because I misunderstood the question. But if it was the 401k, you can put anybody down as the beneficiary, and you can put a trust down as a beneficiary. Just be sure that you have the details written out properly for that.
And to one of Andrea's earlier questions, if I may, to one of your earlier points, Andrea, was, what are really good assets to provide for charity, whoever your favorite charities are, to accomplish your philanthropic goals. That 401k is perfect. Whether it's a certain percent, 10% to charity X, right? 10% to Providence College, whatever it is, and the balance to my 4 kids or whatever, or the balance to my trust or whatever you're trying to achieve. But that's a key asset, especially at death, for your charitable giving.
Great. We have 2 questions and 2 minutes.
Deborah, did Andrea freeze?
Yes, Andrea is frozen.
Let's look at the questions. Maybe we can answer 4.
Can you see me?
You were
Now we
frozen,
can.
Andrea.
Okay, I'm sorry. All right, I got all the way through. I own property in 2 states, Florida and Rhode Island. Do I need living trusts in both states, or can my assets in both states be listed in only one state?
Yeah, short answer is yes to the latter. One trust, and they can be both properties can be part of the trust. Otherwise, you'd have probate in 2 states.
Correct. And so a trust actually is the best way to go if you have property in 2 states. Otherwise,
Absolutely.
You will be probating, right?
Absolutely.
And some point we talked about the ultra wealthy, and this person would like to know, who do you consider to be ultra wealthy when you use that term?
I would say, I'll let Deb answer this too, but from the estate planning perspective right now, the current law is, what is it, like $11.5 million that any one of us can pass to others upon our death or during our lifetimes without estate taxes. That might go down to 5 million with the new administration. We're not sure. So if you're over that amount, then I guess you would want to, I'd consider that ultra high net worth that you want to do something with. From a financial standpoint, we consider ultra high net worth 10 million and above. But I always say, The most money you have is super important to you. So that's, you know, you have to look at what you have. You want to protect it and grow it to the best of your ability, because that's like ultra high net worth to you.
Yeah, I agree with Kathy, just from a pure technical perspective. If you're going to trigger a federal estate tax, so again, there still may be a state estate tax or inheritance tax. Some states still have the old-fashioned inheritance tax, but if you're going to trigger a state death tax, you know, that's one subject. And you know, Massachusetts, for example, $1 million is all you get for an exemption in Mass. So I would not consider anybody with $1 million ultra wealthy, no disrespect intended, right? But if you're going to trigger a federal event, and to Kathy's point, right now, it's it's just shy of 11.6 million for a single person. Double that, so $23-ish million for a married couple. That is set currently in 2025 to sunset and revert anyway, shy to something between probably $5 and $6 million. But to Kathy's point, we wait to see now in 2021 and 2022 what the new administration will do. Word is they will lower the exemption. So, you know, ultra wealthy to me, for sure, at the very least, you're going to pay the feds, and because there are totally legitimate and conservative planning opportunities you can take to avoid, at least lessen, if not avoid, that federal burden. And that's a significant burden.
And I'll just throw in one last thing too, is, you know, you can do it through estate planning. And one of the tools that we do use with estate planning is utilizing an insurance policy to help pay some of those taxes as well. So that's another thing to consider when you're.
Well, that might have to be another Money Matters. Thank you so much, Deb and Kathy. I appreciate it. And everybody who was on tonight, I appreciate this very much. Please do fill out the survey. Be honest and say all nice things. And let us know what you think. What are some topics that you'd like to see in the future? Because we'd like to keep this program going. So thank you so much. Have a great night, and God bless. Thanks, everybody. Go Friars.
Bye. Thanks for having us, Andrea. Thanks, Deb.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice to work with you, Kathy.
Bye.
Bye now.